It's time for us to turn our attention to tennis, and I'm delighted to say Jenny Claffey is with us in studio. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me here today, guys.
You were sitting outside. I was like, I didn't recognise you because you're like not behind a Zoom screen. So the French Open so far has been pretty good. It's been dramatic. There's been good storylines, and yet we seem to have arrived almost imperceptibly at the women's semi-final day today. It feels like there hasn't been enough made of the women's side of the draw, and that's been a kind of a narrative running this week.
Yeah, there's been a bit of controversy this week surrounding the timings and scheduling of the women's game. The tournament director, Naomi Osaka, has come out yesterday to say that the reason for this is basically that the men's game is more appealing to viewers, and it must be where the money is at. So a lot of the players are beginning to speak up now at their distaste for this issue. You see, look at some of the scheduling this week. They call it the graveyard slot, the first matches of the day, and nearly all but one match has been a women's game. And then also they've introduced night matches, and only one of the 11 nights of those have been women's matches. So there's not enough being done there for women.
Because there was a bit of controversy, a tiny bit of needle between Nadal and Djokovic about the time that was on. Nadal felt like he could pick because he's the king of Paris, and he wanted the middle of the afternoon. Djokovic wanted the nighttime because apparently that has a significant impact on clay. I don't know enough about this, but it was enough for them to have a little bit of a beef about it, and that beef seemed to carry on to the post-match where whatever frostiness exists between them. So it's obviously a big deal, and it's been talked about this week. Yeah,
well, I think the schedule that match, particularly the scheduling of that, was maybe more for TV and viewers. The Nadal wanted to play that match during the day because the surface, as you mentioned there, is a little bit more favourable to him. The clay is faster during the day when it's warmer,
like much faster, to the point where they can notice.
Not, I wouldn't say enough that it would win or lose a match, but I'd say it's enough to put a little bit more pressure on Djokovic, like maybe when Nadal's playing against him, because Nadal plays with so much spin, the ball will kick up off the clay, and that'll be able to keep Djokovic back a bit further. Whereas in the evening time, the clay is a little bit heavier, so it's a little bit slower, so that would be more favourable to Djokovic.
And this is because of the weather. This is literally because it's hotter, and the tiny few degrees is going to have an impact. I guess if you're at the level where they're at, where they've played each other a gazillion times and they know each other's game so well, any tiny little bit of something that you feel like you're getting is going to help.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was kind of what Djokovic was looking for that evening match, because he thought that might be more favourable for him.
And then he got it.
Yeah,
but it didn't work.
No, it didn't. Yeah, Nadal though is just so dominant at the moment, and especially, and as you said, the king of clay in Paris. Like, this is his home tournament. He's only ever lost 3 times there in the last 17 years. So I think it's surprising he didn't get his way, Nadal. But it just shows the power of the media there, that that match was put on in the evening.
And that's about TV viewership. It's not like so, and that's what we're talking about here with the women's game, is that they haven't had the opportunity to showcase. So there's a bit of chicken and egg here, is that these women's players are not as well known as the men's because they're not on TV at the prime spot, and so they're not on the TV in the prime spot because they're not as well known as the men's, and away around we go.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, how do you improve it then, if you don't give them the chance?
Yeah, well, I think with the introduction of Naomi Osaka as the tournament director in the French Open this year, that definitely was giving confidence to the women's game, that they would be more likely to promote the women's game. But I just think that the fact that the men are, as I said, in the spotlight all the time, it's not giving those stars of the women's game a chance to get well known, and that feeds into the fact that people are saying, why is there no big stars in the tennis game? Because we're not seeing them on the screen. That's the big issue there.
And it's so surprising from someone who's been there and been in the spotlight, has won these major tournaments, to speak like that. Like, I was quite shocked when I read her comments.
Yeah, I mean, especially how she was very nonchalant about expressing that the men's game was more appealing. The backlash of that then is, of course, the players saying that, like, how can we get into the spotlight if you're not giving us the chance? They just have to give them the chance, and then, like, we of course will then begin to see them get more known with the names, more familiar with the games, the game styles, etc. of those players. But yeah, that seems to be a big issue now, that chicken and egg.
Is there going to be any fallout? Is she going to change? It's kind of too late now, right? Because, like, today's semi-final day, and there's not much opportunity for her to make amends for this.
No, I think next year there's going to have to be a change. But the WTA have come out now, the women's organisation, to speak about their how unhappy they are about it as well. So there will definitely be change going forward based on that.
Okay, talk to us about the 2 semi-finals today. Coco Gauff is kind of in the papers in this part of the world, I guess because we've been following her for a number of years, and it feels like she's beginning to deliver on the promise that she's shown. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think, she's been in the spotlight since she shot to fame and when she was 15 there 3 years ago after she beat Venus Williams in Wimbledon. And then I think she struggled a little bit with that fame, and her game has kind of always been there, but I think she's suffered a little bit off court, and mentally with the pressures of being a star. But she's shown in this Grand Slam and then the last few tournaments running up to this that she's in good form. She's serving very well. She's playing her game really well, controlling the ball. And I think that she's going to be a threat today versus Trevisan.
Talk to us about Trevisan. Who is she?
She's, a relatively unheard name. She's the 59th ranked player in the world. She's an Italian player. She's had a really interesting background as well. This year she's had 10 consecutive match wins, having coming in off a win, her first title in Morocco last week. So she's on a streak at the moment. But prior to this, she's had spoken out in the media about her battle with anorexia and how she had to take 4 years off the professional tour to deal with that. So it's great to see a comeback of that sorts now. And 2 years ago, she got to the quarterfinal of the French Open as well. So she is comfortable in Roland Garros and on the clay. So it'll be an interesting matchup because two very different styles. Trevisan will be more of a traditional clay court player where she's more defensive and plays with a lot of spin, whereas Goff will be coming in and trying to be a little bit more aggressive and dictate the way she plays.
What is Coco Gauff's game then? Where on what surface would you expect her game to be the most fluent and successful?
I would think that a hard court would suit her a bit better because it'll be a bit faster and she's able to play with a little bit more power, so she can be a bit more dominant, whereas on the clay you've got a little bit more time on the surface and not as many winners are hit. So I think a hard court or even a grass court would suit her style because she plays so fast. Okay,
so you expect Goff to win this?
I would expect Goff to come through that semi-final, yes.
Okay, and the other one is tricky names to pronounce for us this morning as we were practicing in the ad break here.
Iga Świątek versus Christina. There you go,
Give it a go.
What's going to happen in this one?
I think all the talk is about Świątek at the moment. She is the star of the women's game. She's on a 33 match winning streak, 5 tournaments in a row. She's the world number 1. She's really on form. She's coming up against Kazakhina of Russia, who is also on form, has shown results in the French Open in previous years as well. She's also been in the top 10. But Świątek is the dominant player of the women's game at the moment. To look out for in today's match, we would want to see Świątek using her big forehand to dictate play, staying up close to the baseline, trying to control the rallies, whereas you'll see Kazakhina hanging back a little bit, trying to defend because she plays a little bit more defensive game, but she's going to have to try to impose herself by playing a little bit flatter because Świątek will just be dictating and overpowering from the baseline.
Obviously Swiatek has won this before and kind of knows what this is all about. She's only 21, so are we looking at the birth of like a dominant force over the next period of time?
I think that she is one to look out for. Now we've mentioned the likes of like Osaka in previous years and even this year she's done well, but I think Świątek is really the woman of the moment in the women's game. She has the game to be the best as she is the number 1 at the moment. She also has incredible poise and mental strength, which we see. She travels with her psychologist full time and attests a lot of her success to having her psychologist alongside her, which is obviously shown on court because she's so tough mentally. She's also physically very strong. She has all the shots in her repertoire. I think that she is the woman to dominate the game.
It feels like there's a generation kind of, even so, as I said, she's just turned 21, is that right?
Just
yeah. So with her and that generation who are just behind her, it looks like we're about to reach a stage where we're going to be seeing these week in, week out in the late slot and the French Open over the next coming few years. Like, it's kind of weird they didn't take the opportunity to establish them as stars this time, isn't it?
Yeah. It's a real shame. It's very disappointing that we haven't got a chance to see these stars up in the lights, you know. But I think in the coming years, Świątek will be up there with the likes of Osaka, and like they could be a rivalry in years to come, you know. And there's a few other players, Maria Sakkari and Sabalenka, those hard hitters who also will be pushing. And I think we're going to see those names in future names in the next few years. With big rivalries, maybe not quite like the big 4 of the men's game where you had Nadal, Murray, Djokovic and Federer, but I do think we're to look out for those names in the next.
Was Raducanu going to join them, or was that like a flash in the pan?
Yeah, she's an interesting one. She has an amazing game. Her game is suited to be the top of the women's game, but she's just, I'm not sure she's quite caught up there, maturity wise and mentally. As I said, that's a huge part of the game. So she's just shot to fame, and that's a huge thing, especially with the Brits. They're so. She's a star in the making, but they
straight away,
straight away.
And then as soon as you start to fail, it's like, we knew all along. We were just building you up to pull you down.
There is that narrative with the Brits, and especially in tennis, and it's with everything. But you can see it in the tennis. So I think they've jumped on the bandwagon of Emma Raducanu, who's going to be the next big thing. But I think she might take a little bit longer to get to that, to stay at that top, the consistency at the top of the game. But she does have the game definitely to be in the top.
Is it more difficult for the women who break through at an early stage in the women's game than it is for the men's? Because you're talking about various players having to deal with either anorexia or the difficulty of being famous really quickly. It seems like that happens less in the men's game, and maybe it happened less in the men's game because the big four were there, and so we saw fewer people break through and be put up on that pedestal so quickly. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that, as you said, that those four were so dominant for so long that there was nobody was breaking through there. But there were those on the periphery, like the likes of Zverev, who's now in the semi-final today, and he's a really big name player who's breaking through. Alcaraz, the young Spaniard, he's 19. That's really unheard of to have such a young player in the men's game at such a high level so quickly. It does take a little bit longer because there's such a wide pool of men's players who are at the top. Even the top 100 are all contesting week in, week out, outside of those top four though.
And just went back to Kasatkina because I just thought it was so interesting to see players on clay and the differences between clay and then the grass court. And she's a player that's always been particularly good on clay. So you think that's maybe a bit of an advantage that she has, that she can maybe try and have one over Świątek, or is she just way ahead?
Yeah, well, I think, they actually both got Świątek got asked that in an interview about, this is Kasatkina's favourite surface, and Świątek's response was, so clay is my favourite surface too. So it'll be that matchup, like they're both playing on their preferred surface. But the games, you say, are different on the different surfaces. So as we see on a clay court, the ball is bouncing much higher. Players are playing from much deeper in the court, so they're much further back. So they're playing with a lot of spin and pushing each other back. Whereas if you compare that to, say, a grass court, the ball bounces very low in a grass court. You see a different kind of a game where the players are coming into the net more because the balls are landing maybe a little bit shorter, so they're able to come in and follow those in. The ball's bouncing far less on that. And then on a hard court, that's a little bit similar to clay, but there's no sliding necessarily on a hard court versus a clay court. Whereas like on a clay, the surface allows for you to slide through it and play shots, whereas on a hard court this isn't the same. You're stuck to the ground more, so it does play a high bounce, but not as compared to clay. But you will see some players sliding on a hard court. That's like a Djokovic, like that incredible athleticism he has to be able to do that, but I wouldn't try that at home.
Is it more difficult on the clay?
The game. It's more physical, definitely more physical. The matches go on longer. The rallies last a lot longer than they do on the likes of a grass court. More difficult. I think it can be more forgiving in ways because more players get a chance on a clay court, because the likes of players who are playing defensive game style, it suits a clay court because they can just run around all day defending, whereas you don't get away with that on a faster surface. So it allows for a little bit more players to come shine through in these, like the likes of Kasatkina.
Did you get an opportunity to play on clay courts much? I'm guessing there's not too many of them in Ireland.
No, there's one. When I was growing up, there was only one clay court that was down in Tipperary. Now a few more courts have this artificial clay because we realise it's a really beneficial surface to learn on, because it's really good for your fitness. The rallies are lasting longer. You're learning to play a different game style. But when I was competing, a lot of the surfaces I chose to play on were on hard court because it suited my game more so. I had a big serve and a big forehand, so I liked to play aggressively, so the hard court suited that. Whereas the clay, I wasn't as comfortable, rallying all like 20 shots. So I was much more comfortable trying to be more aggressive. So I played more on a hard court. Sorry.
The point about Djokovic sliding on the hard courts, does he have to have special runners for that? Like,
there are different shoes for different surfaces. No, but the shoes
don't run the risk of like wrecking your knee.
Over his ankle. They do, but they have that. Just they're incredibly supple, and their bodies are able for that. You don't see every player doing that.
And even with Nadal with his foot problem. So when I was watching yesterday, I was thinking, wow, they're really planting their foot to try and probably keep themselves composed and reach the shot. And I was thinking, God, and he has this chronic foot problem as well. So you would think that the clay wouldn't be as good for that sort of thing, but he seems to be better on the clay.
Definitely injury-wise, I'm not sure that that's so good for him, but the clay just suits his game so well because he plays with such heavy spin that he is so dominant with his game style on a clay court, whereas his body is not holding up. I don't know if you heard him saying the other day that he's not sure how much longer he can go on with this chronic injury he has.
Yeah, it seems like this is a possibility that he walks away at the end of this tournament. That suddenly I felt a little bit like, as opposed to, oh, this is going to be my last French, I'll continue on. Like there was a bang of, I might just ride out now. You know, if he wins this, like, why would he show up when he's probably not going to win Wimbledon? He's got a good chance in America, but at the US, I don't know. Is there any possibility?
There was a hint of that definitely in his post-match interview after he played Djokovic there. He was saying that he's now travelling with his doctor because they're doing some sort of treatment, which he said he wouldn't say what it was until after the tournament. But he has been alluding to the fact that this could be his last French Open. But I think that that's playing into his performance almost in this French Open because he is so... He knows this could be his last chance. He is so determined to win that 22nd Grand Slam and his 14th Roland Garros. So I think that he's going through any kinds of pains barrier now just to see it over the line.
Notwithstanding that, it was then a bit weird to see him at the Champions League final where it's like you should literally have your feet up watching this at home.
Yeah. Real Madrid are his team, you know, and it's in Paris.
I mean, I'm sure unless he had a police escort, the traffic is crap, you know, so that's and if it had gone to extra time and penalties, that's like 4 hours off your feet. I don't know. I wasn't terribly surprised to see his next match go to 5 sets the next day. So just to go back to Naomi Osaka, who you mentioned there, right? How long do you think she's going to play, and what is her future?
Well, that's hard to tell. I suppose she's taken the last year, you know, kind of handy in terms of competition wise. She's getting back into it now this year. She cited, as we know, last year about mental health issues, and she's come out and said that she was actually depressed this time last year. I think she's gone through obviously a very tough time. She shot to fame very quickly, won back-to-back Grand Slams, was at the top of the game, and then all of a sudden, as we know, was struggling with that. I think there is definitely a future for Osaka. She's an incredible athlete, really, really strong tennis player, has all the shots in her repertoire. It's just about whether she can keep the off-court, on-court balance going, because I think she's really now focusing on trying to live in more of the moment. She's saying that she's trying to focus on living her life off the court and then enjoying tennis while she's on court.
Yeah. And obviously you wish her the very best at that. It would be great to see her at Wimbledon, and it would have been great for the comments around Wimbledon to be like, oh look, we really understand what's going on, there's a war on, you know, and so therefore our ranking points aren't probably the most important thing in the world at the moment.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? And how they've banned the players. You could see them playing, some of the Russian players playing under the neutral flag here in the French Open that Wimbledon are not allowing.
So do you think it will have an impact on players showing up, really? Or are they going to go like, I mean, the money and the fame and maybe just because we grew up with Wimbledon on TV all the time, like, it's still really important, irrespective of whether or not there's ranking points, right?
Yeah, well, Wimbledon is Wimbledon. Everybody wants to be in Wimbledon. Everyone wants to win Wimbledon. I do think that that's going to take the edge off it, though, not having the ranking points on offer. But I don't think anyone's going to drop out because of that. They're still going to have the prestige of Wimbledon and taking that title home at the end.
Yeah, like, it's not the Olympics. You know?
Yeah, true.
I mean, can you name any of the Olympic tennis champions over the last 24 years?
Why did you do that to me?
Have a guess.
Jenny.
Zverev won this one, but I only know that because I read it yesterday on Wikipedia. Not my...
Yeah, well, as in the prestige around the Olympics.
Exactly.
Yeah, people aren't as...
Because there's no ranking points, and there never was. People are like, well, this doesn't really matter, but it's Wimbledon.
It's Wimbledon. If it was the French Open, or it might have been another Grand Slam, maybe you might have a bit of a drop off. But it is Wimbledon. But it is really disappointing that has happened, because it does take that, like, the prestige out of it. But at the same time, I think everyone will still want that Wimbledon trophy at the end of it.
Is there any prospect of Serena Williams playing this year in Wimbledon and or in the US Open?
She's been very quiet the last while, with her game and off court. Nobody really knows what's going on as such. But I'd love to see her coming back in Wimbledon. Grass would really suit her, with her big game. I'm not sure, she's 40 now. I'm not sure that her focus is on regaining her form.
It's funny that there hasn't been a formal announcement.
Yeah, we're kind of hanging.
Which always leaves it open.
Whereas like Federer, if you look at Federer, he's been clinging on now for the last while with a knee injury. But I also there'll be doubts around his comeback to the game. Kind of Williams and Federer seem to be in the same. I put them in the same box now. They're almost at the end, but not quite ready to retire just yet.
So you were talking about grass and hardcourt. Does that mean that you're like, if you were to power rank your favourite majors, it goes Wimbledon first?
Yes, definitely Wimbledon. Wimbledon is everyone's favourite. I think everyone knows Wimbledon. If you ask anyone on the street, they know what Wimbledon is, but they probably don't know what the Australian Open is or the US Open.
Yeah. So the Australian Open, not really a major. We've had this debate before on the show. Like it's got grandfathered in really. So it's the US Open then second. I go that to the French.
I'd say US, then Australia, and then the French. Just because Clay's my least favourite surface, so I find the viewership is better for Wimbledon, the US.
And so you're involved in tennis coaching. Is this the time of the year where all of a sudden like your phone is ringing off the hook and everybody wants back in?
Yeah, those 2 weeks of Wimbledon, you have everybody ringing you looking to play tennis. Everybody seems to get inspired at this time of year.
I was looking at Świątek's biography, and her dad was a rower in the Olympics in Seoul in '88. Ireland is a country that produces many rowers, and so if the father of a great tennis player can be a rower, why can't we have any more great tennis players?
Absolutely, both of her parents were athletes. Świątek. Why we don't have tennis players in Ireland is quite up for debate for many years now. There's a lack of, I think, a deep pool of players here, so we seem to have lots of competition with other sports, the likes of GAA and soccer and those more voluntary sports, whereas tennis is more of seen a luxury sport because it's obviously you pay your way for it and it's quite expensive sport. But we lack as well the facilities here in Ireland. Like we don't have that many indoor facilities, and obviously we're a nation of rain, so that's a problem like during the year. And the surface then is really important that you train on. You see a lot of those players, professional players now, they are growing up on clay, which I was mentioning is a really good surface fundamentally to learn the game. We don't have that here.
That's why there's so many Spaniards who are in the top 50. Exactly,
yeah, that's it. That's there's only clay in Spain pretty much, whereas the facilities here, the indoor facilities was a big issue, and only in recent years now we've started putting these bubbles up around the courts, but that's pretty much only in Leinster. So the likes of Munster have no indoor facilities whatsoever, so how can they produce players, when we're being called off a few times a week with the weather that we have here? As I said, but the pool, like when I was at the top of the game, when I was playing professionally here, the problem I was having was there wasn't anybody to train with who was putting me under pressure. So that's why a lot of the players who are kind of 16 here, if there's any kind of potential for them, they'll go abroad to Spanish academies, tennis academies, or over to France for academies, because that's where you're going to have that big pool of players and lots of different styles to be playing against.
Is that too late sometimes as well? Like, I mean, not to write off any 16-year-old who's like, what? But like, so if you're in Spain at 12, you're playing against players who are world class because, is that? Do you need to even go a little bit earlier?
Yeah, I mean, yes, but at that age, 12, that's a huge sacrifice then for the family. And then does the family go with you? Does the family stay? And 12 is very young to send a child away. But at 16, you'd want to be making inroads in the junior international tour. Like you'd want to be near the top, the top 250 at least at that stage if you're going to have a positive progression into the senior tour. But we're not going to get that at 16. You said like you're developed, your game is developed a lot by 16. So it would be better and more beneficial to go at an earlier age. But it's hard to talent spot so young here, especially when they're playing so many sports. And tennis is not the first choice for most people, even if they are incredibly talented.
Do you see it's more male or female that are playing from a young age?
Here, there's more men, definitely more men playing, and more men have had more success on the tour here. But there are a lot of, at grassroots level, there's kind of a good mix. Like I see it in where I'm coaching. There's a huge amount of girls, but there's a drop off then we kind of get to about 12, and then they're not playing, and they either go into, the team sports because girls want to be amongst their other pals, whereas the guys are a little bit more competitive and they stick with it a little bit longer here.
Are you confident about the future of Irish tennis, or is it something that we need a bit of a rethink on?
There definitely needs to be a little bit of a restructure, and there is a restructuring going on at the moment with Tennis Ireland. But there needs to be a change definitely going on there, like bringing on more coaches, letting the provinces like the Leinster, Munster, Ulster do their thing as well with their players, and not taking the players up to Dublin and having them only training in Dublin. They need to be back at home. They need to be amongst other players from their provinces, and with the coaches, putting a little bit more trust in the coaches around the country.
That would drive local standards, which in turn will drive the national standards.
Yes, exactly. exactly. Yeah. So not taking them when they're only 10.